Join us as we share our experiences, strength, and hope. When the world says, give up, hope whispers, try it one more time.
What's going on, Mile High? And welcome back to sharing our stories. My name is Slim with Nani Al-Jalil from Tribe Recovery Homes. Our guest, Brandi Jennings from Denver. And if you're a newbie around here, Sharing Our Stories is a program about addiction and recovery. We share stories about the struggles we've had in addiction to drugs and or alcohol. Everybody has had to deal with these things in this room. And we let you know that, yes, we do recover, and we try to spread that strength, that hope, that, yes, recovery can happen, and it can happen for you, a loved one, a friend, a family member. Don't believe that somebody has to suffer in addiction forever. So welcome to the program, and I want to thank our guest for being here, Brandi Jennings from Denver. How you doing?
Doing great.
High five to you, girl. My girl, Nani Al-Jalil here representing Tribe Recovery Homes. Tomas Hernandez, the president and CEO of Tribe, is currently in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Right? Am I right?
Yep.
Okay. He's always in Las Vegas because Tribe Recovery Homes is consistently expanding and just doing amazing things. Hi, Nani.
Hi, Slim.
How you been?
Been good.
So everybody gave me a hard time that last week when we were here, I was like, gonna let Nani speak.
Give you a hard time. Cut me
Nani's
off.
always here. She just gets to show her face and we don't let her talk. So we were going to ask Nani how she's doing. We were like, Nani, how you doing? And she said 2 words and then we cut her off.
Cut me off.
Yep. So how you doing, Nani?
Doing really good.
All right. So great. Our guest today is Brandi Jennings.
Thank you, Slim. I appreciate it.
We're getting ready for the holiday.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, do you guys see, and I know you haven't been with Tribe for like 10 years, but in the time that you've been there, do you see things increase during the holidays? Do you have more people that come in after the holidays?
Yeah, I think that that's the natural course, right? During the holiday season, it's cold out there, and also mental health and substance use increases. That's what happens during the holiday season. And we want to encourage people, if you need help, if you need somewhere to go, please call us, reach out to us. We're there to support you. We're there to help walk beside you. So reach out to Tribe. That's what we're here for.
Having some blackout alcohol days during the holidays, especially holidays that I spent by myself.
Right.
Because I don't have any family here in Colorado.
Right.
So I spend my holidays, if I don't have a girlfriend at the time, I spend my holidays with my dogs if I don't fly away. And I remember holidays where I would just sit there and I couldn't tell you a holiday happened. Mm-hmm. Blackout drunk and just, drinking in my depression.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of us, the holidays are really difficult. It's a difficult time.
And you deal with so many different things, whether it's no family or maybe you've lost family members, loneliness.
Yeah.
Just sometimes I think it's as much as, Christmas is here and you don't feel like you can provide for your family. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can't provide because you're using, but you're not thinking about that part. You're just thinking, I can't provide. And you go, use.
Yep. Absolutely.
Drink, do drugs, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we don't want people to suffer. We want people to know that they have a place to go. You have a home at Tribe. Yep. And if it's not Tribe, if we're not the fit for you, we will help you find a place to go.
I think that's really important. And it's something you should know about. I would say the majority of sober living homes and programs here is if they can't help you, they want to put you in touch with somebody who can.
Yes.
So when you call somebody and you talk to them and you go, I don't know if this is it, or they say, you know what, this may not be the place for you. Ask them what else they know and where else they can send you, or if they have connections for you. If they don't have anything for you, if they're like, I don't have any idea for you, that's probably not the place you wanted to begin with.
Exactly. Yes, right? Exactly.
If they're like, no, it's us or the highway, you'll never survive anywhere else. Well, you know what? You will. You will, and you don't want them. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I want to use up all of our time for our guest Brandi today and not just eat it up. And, because we can talk, especially Nani. I'll ask her one question, give her 2-word answer, and just keep on going.
That's right, Slim.
Checks out.
Tracks.
But Brandi, you're from Denver?
I'm from, I come from a military family. So I grew up in California.
Okay.
And then I progressed on to the South. And then I came back to Washington State, and then I came to Denver 17 years ago.
So are we at 4 locations, or that's just what I caught? There's more than that?
There's 4.
There's 4?
There absolutely is.
I've been everywhere. Well, I'm glad we have you here in Colorado, and I'm glad you are here to share with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. This program is all yours. We open up the time for you. Want you to use it to tell everybody what you've been through and where you're at now, and let's spread some hope that people do recover. We believe that by doing this program and sharing our stories, that hopefully we can touch somebody out there. Absolutely. Whether they're suffering in their addiction, or maybe they know a friend or a family member, and right now they're like, I don't know what to do about my brother or my best friend, and I don't understand how to talk to them or what they're going through, and I give up on them. I understand those thoughts and those feelings, but we want to let you know that maybe you'll hear this and go, you know what? I think I understand my friend, my brother, my cousin a little bit more, and maybe I can still stand in their corner and try to support them in getting clean. So that's what this program's about. And Mile High, our guest today, Brandi Jennings from Denver. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the beginning. I grew up in a very normal military family. I had a father that provided, a stepmom that stayed home. I had a little bit of trauma in my childhood. My mother left when I was 3, and I was, basically abandoned for a large majority of my childhood by her. So I always had that in the back of my head. I did go through some abuse early on in my teenage years, and but I never knew that I just knew I was different, right? That I didn't fit in anywhere, and I really couldn't figure out why. And it wasn't until later when I got into recovery that I figured out that I've always been an addict in one form or another, long before I put drugs in my body. And so I'll progress from there. I got to the age of 13. My father and my mother, they had rules. I was not one that liked to follow rules. I like to be, rebellious, probably like any teenager, but enhanced, right? Because I have an addictive personality, and I like to take everything from 0 or 100. I'm either at 0 or I'm at 100, and there's really no in between. And so I decided at the age of 13, I had found my mother, and she had no rules. She had the guilt and the shame, and I was manipulative, right? Because we know how to manipulate people. And so I played on that, and I went to live with her. And it wasn't long before I was pregnant, and I had kids very young. I was a great mom. I was coaching t-ball, coaching, flag football, doing all the things and the stuff with the kids. I had 4 kids back to back. And I got married when I was 16. And although he and I are excellent friends today, that didn't work out. And so I got married when I was in my early 20s to, a man that I loved very much. I had no idea that he was using drugs. And it was probably 7 years into our marriage that this came about, where, I found out that he was using drugs. And at this point, I was going to college. I was a welder and ship fitter at the shipyards in the South. And I was raising 4 kids. And it was a lot, and I've always put a lot on my plate, but the solution was, hey, maybe you should try some of this. And so I tried some meth, and I could, I felt like I was Superwoman. I could do everything, and I was labeling shit, and it was really crazy. And that's back when this stuff was, 20 times stronger than it is now. And my kidneys shut down immediately. I had never been a drinker. I had never used pot. I had never used anything to that point. I just wasn't exposed to any of that, probably from my dad sheltering me, and then also from the fact that I was so busy being a parent. And in the hospital, they gave me IV dilaudid. And that is where I found my love, and my drug of choice was opiates. And when I say my drug of choice, please don't get it twisted. I will do anything that is there, pretty much. my drug of choice is more, and preferably more of yours. So I
The things we come up with some great phrases.
We sure do.
right.
Yeah.
And so it progressed very quickly. And I also, I'm an addict in every way, and everything is enhanced, like I said. And I also saw the in there to make money, because I was from Cali, and the stuff was, I was in, like New Orleans, Biloxi, Pascagoula, building boats and ships, and everybody. It's crazy because when you're not using, you think nobody else is using, but when you're using, you recognize everybody who is using. And from the gold hats down, they were fucking high, And so I was like, well, I could make some money with this. So I started, before 9/11, of course, started flying to California, bringing drugs back in. My husband was what I would call, a really addicted but functioning addict, right? But that's not how I do my stuff, right? The minute I put dope in my body, my life crumbles. And so I was always told by him and the people surrounding him, hey, why can't you just use like we do? So I always literally thought that I needed to try to get better at using. And I tried and tried and tried to use better. And eventually we were using so many drugs that things got very violent, right? They got violent. He had never been doing that many drugs before as I was like bringing in. So we were using horribly, and everything started to fall apart, and there was abuse, and there was all this stuff. And I was finally at a point where I left that because of the abuse. I took my children with me, and he kept breaking into my places of residence, and it was a point where he was really connected there in the South, and I was just a girl from Cali. And it was, the small town, good old boy thing. And I'll never forget sitting in a sheriff's department, and one of the newer women sheriffs came up to me and said, if you don't leave, he's going to kill you. Take your kids and go. And so I fled to the state of Washington, where my parents had moved to retire, even though my dad continued working. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave this place, and, I'm going to detox, and I'm going to, I'm just not going to be able to find any drugs, and everything will be cool.
So did you recognize at that time that you had, were you thinking to yourself, I have a drug problem?
Absolutely not. I was thinking I needed to try harder.
Yeah.
Try harder. Like, I can control this. Like, I can work this out. I need to change this.
I can function.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got this, I absolutely had never heard the word addict. I had never heard the word recovery. I had never heard of a 12-step fellowship. I just knew that I wasn't able to function. And so I believed that I had a moral dilemma, that I was just a piece of crap, and that I was a bad mother, and how could I let this happen? And all of the blame was focused on me. All of the guilt and the shame was on me, which just provoked me to use more, right, to numb those feelings. And so I was selling specific drugs to support my habit of my drug of choice, and it just continued. And I got off the airplane with my children in Seattle, and was immediately approached by 6 officers. With their hands on their guns, and they said, you have an outstanding $83 check in Mississippi, and we have a governor's warrant for you. And this is how good old boy it was back then. And they said, we have to take your children, and you're going to jail awaiting extradition. And so
for an $83 check.
An $83 bounce check, correct, which I don't even think existed. It never came up again. So my parents were able to take the kids, and they said you have to return them back to their father within 2 days. And so I was transported, and they actually have jails in the bottom of airports, in case you didn't know. There's cells down there.
Good information.
Right. And so I went to, Island County Jail, and was awaiting extradition. And if they didn't come to get me in 60 days, they would let me go. And so I got to see my kids for the last time behind plexiglass, and I'll never forget their little hands, on mine, and I just didn't know when I was going to get to see them again. And so I waited extradition for 60 days. Of course, nobody came to get me. There was probably never a check. Who knows? I could be bitter about that, or I could just be like, this is part of my solution eventually, right? So you got to find gratitude in these things. When I was released from jail after 60 days, I called to try to get my children back, and they said, your parental rights are severed because you abandoned your children. Now, this was in fact not true. However, in my mind, I was such a piece of crap, and I was I was such a bad mother, like I deserved this, right? So I deserved for this to happen to me. And so then my excuse to use became, I lost my kids. Now I lost my kids this amount of time ago, and now, I have nothing to live for. And so I became, I went on a mission of slow suicide, right? Because I never had the balls to do that or even have that cross my mind, but I definitely was on slowly committing suicide. And I'll never forget sitting in jail, and I got out, and I caught a charge for we lived on an island on Whidbey Island, right? And there's two pharmacies, one on the north end and one on the south end at this time, and I was forging prescriptions. It didn't take long for me to get caught forging these prescriptions. I'll never forget, I went to jail for the first time, and for the second time, but the first time that I put myself there, and the girls in the jail were like, why are you forging prescriptions? We definitely have something better for you. You can get really good heroin here, and it's, a lot cheaper. And so I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Thanks, girls. And so I got out of jail, and I was doing a lot of heroin, a lot of cocaine, and I was full throttle. And I was always trying to make money, but as we know, right, that money goes straight to my habit. And I'm not a great criminal. I'm just a very blunt person. And so the getting and using and finding ways and means to get more consumed me. And I kept going to jail over and over and over again. I think at one point they came to me, and it was either Island County or Mount Vernon and Skagit County. And the captain came to me, and she's like, I want you to look at these arrest photos, and I want you to look at the progression. And it was horrible. It was like something from a poster, right? And I was just slowly killing myself. And my father,
I'm sorry to cut
Go
you
ahead.
off. Did those posters, those pictures, did they stop you in any way? I mean, you said it was horrible, but did it make you go, oh my goodness?
No. Much like losing my children didn't stop me, that didn't stop me, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was horrible, but not horrible enough to stop using drugs, right? And so I need to go back a little bit. My father, man, he's always been my biggest supporter. He has had me from the age of 3, and he has always stood by my side no matter what. I remember calling my dad and being like, I'm just the manipulative shit I would do. I would call him, and I would say, hey, if you don't bring me some new needles, I'm going to get this disease or something, just horrible stuff to put your parents through. I remember him, calling him like, I need to get out of here, and him coming to trap houses and waiting outside for me for hours for me to come out of there, and it didn't matter. My dad had this rule, and he would pay for my cell phone as long as I would call him every day. And if he didn't hear from me after day 2, he would shut my cell phone off. And because he knew I had a habit, and he knew that I would have to call somebody to fill that habit. So if I wasn't calling to check in with him and my phone got shut up and then I didn't reply, he would start calling the hospitals and jails. And I always wondered, how does he know I'm in jail? But this is the pattern that he had. And his biggest fear was, of course, calling the hospitals to find out I was dead, because really that's where everybody thought I was going to wind up. And we didn't know about addiction. We just, my family saw me grow up. There's no addiction in my family except for me, right, on my dad's side, which is where I where I knew. And we didn't understand it, right? And we weren't taught anything until I got clean. And so he found me in places that I was so happy to see him, but I didn't want him to see me like that, right? And so in the back of my mind, I was like, one day I'm gonna make my dad proud, one day. And so I went on to keep catching charges, right? I went to prison in Washington twice, maybe 3 times to Purdy, and they would just let me out, right? They did have a thing called drug court there, but the deal was back then, I didn't know what drug court was, I just knew it was for people who use drugs, right? And so the deal was if you didn't successfully complete drug court, you would do twice your sentence. Well, I was an addict, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a bad deal.
No.
Yeah.
And I could always find drugs in prison. Like that was not a thing. Mm-hmm. And so I continued, I was like, just give me my time, we're good, And so I would get into prison, I would come out, I would fail my first UA, and I would run. Mm-hmm. And then they would catch me, and then I would go back to prison, they would let me out, I would fail my UA, and I would run. And it was this hamster wheel of emotions, and they gave you like $20 when you got out back then, and I always used it before I got home to the island. I was like at Tacoma pre-release or somewhere, and it would be gone, and I would be off to the races again. And it wasn't my intention, like when I was in prison, right? Because without a plan, without a solid plan, and like knowing where we're going and knowing what our actions are going to be, and without knowing that we are an addict, we are stuck with the committee between our head, right? And it's going to tell us the same thing over and over again, like you have to have this to feel better. You have to have this to function. And so, and before I knew it, I was like 8 years into my addiction, and I was still telling the same story. Yeah, well, you don't know what happened to me. Like, I lost my kids 2 years ago, and it had been 8 years. You know what I mean? Because the time just goes and goes. And so finally, I caught another case, and not that anybody was throwing them to me, but that's what we say, right? So I caught another case, and we were looking at 14 years this time for manufacturing distribution, and it wasn't just possession or anything like that. And so I remember specifically being let out of jail to go do a drug evaluation. Like, I don't know who thought they were going to let me out of jail or what idiot came up with that plan, but I knew where I was going. I was going on the run. And so I kept running, and it's a small island, so I was like off island. And eventually this guy, I knew a lot of people. I knew most people in the game, right? And so I was at a trap house. I was selling my drug to support this drug. We were kind of dry, and this guy showed up from another island, and he's like, hey, every door that we go to, they're knocking on the door looking for you. It's the cops. Like, they are coming. And he's like, I'm like, well, I just got to wait here for some of my stuff. He's like, oh, no, I got that. Do you have this? And so I had his drug of choice. He had my drug of choice. So I left town with him and married him. Right?
Obviously.
Of course, that's the plan.
It made
perfect sense.
I'm like, I could change my, like, I had no,
you know what I want, I have what you want.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it is definitely, yeah, he's like, I got people in Colorado. We can run to Colorado. They won't find you. I'll change your name. Like,
yeah.
And it all happened really fast. So we dipped out, And so when I look back at it, I'm like, what the hell were you thinking? But in my drug-induced, psychosis and everything else, like, it sounded like a legit plan. And so we get to Colorado, right? It's about, I don't know, we ran out of drugs on the way. It was like 2 weeks before, and I was like going down the street. I'm like, I recognize my people. So I'm like, hey, where do you get drugs? And they said, Colfax.
Yes.
Checks out.
That's the one.
Yeah, checks out.
So I went to, I'll never forget it, right? So, I could always call my dad to help me, but I always believed in kind of supporting my own habit, but I didn't have a game here, right? I didn't have game. I didn't have people. And so, but I did know how to use an oxygen acetylene torch. And this is back when they were in 2007, when they were, demoing all the hotels to build the VA and the Children's Hospital. And so I'm like, copper, right? And so,
oh man, the copper
and
game.
so we're in, in these abandoned hotels, cutting down the copper pipe, like putting them in the back of the truck. And that's how I was supporting my habit. And so nobody told me, like, don't do crime on Colfax. Like, nobody said, like, this is probably a bad place to be at 4 o'clock in the morning cutting down copper pipe out of abandoned buildings, right? But I was doing that. And so all of a sudden, like, 6 cop cars roll up, their lights on, and they're all, whose copper is this? I'm like, mine, like what? That belongs to me, And so I was sick, and I'll never forget it. And so I went to jail that day in 2007. It was August 27th of 2007, and that was my first clean date for 10 years. And so I'll never forget. I couldn't even go to court for 3 days because they couldn't. I was that sick. Like, they wouldn't even let me go to court. And I remember, like, stumbling into court and looking at these papers, and it said 24 to 48 years for habitual offender. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is that? They have the habitual offender here, better known as the bitch count. And so, but I remember this feeling, and I was like, I was praying. I was like, God, if you'll get me out of this, like, if you will, I've got to do something, because my dad doesn't have 24 to 48 years to wait for me to make a change. And I didn't know what that change was going to be, but I remember this very intense feeling of, like, something is going to be different. And I didn't know what it was. I still didn't know what recovery was. I didn't know what addiction was. I just knew I was a piece of shit who had messed everybody's lives up, And so I stayed there for a while, and I got, the pre-sentencing investigation, the PSI. And I'll never forget, the lady was like, we don't have any record of you ever being to treatment or you ever, being offered anything except for prison. And I'm like, I was like, I don't want any part of that double sentence stuff. Like, that would be life for me. And so, I figured it was another drug court scam, And so she said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I think I can get you into somewhere, and they call it the last house on the block. And you can get better there. And I was real reluctant, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then she said they didn't have a fence, and I was like, send me there.
That place.
Send me to that place.
The place that I can run from.
Right, that part. So I sat in Arapahoe County for 8 months, and I didn't use. And I started to get some clarity, enough clarity that I thought I had a solid plan to run, like, of what I was going to do and how I was going to do this better. And I started.
But still to run. Right.
I was still going to run. I was terrified. But I was hearing I was hearing enough that I was curious about what this Haven Pier 1 program was, right? But I wasn't solid enough to where I was like, I'm out of here, And so I'll never forget, they picked me up. I had, like, cornrows in my hair, and, like, I was like, I was running the pod, you know what I mean? Like I had all my shit together.
It's a picture I can't see, but I'm trying to put the cornrows on your head.
I know. I can send you a picture. And so, yeah, they had that shot of me, when I graduated. It was, like, right there. And so, but I showed up, and immediately, they're like, take that out of your hair. Like, you're not, like, what is wrong with you? And I just remember walking into this house, and the lady that ran it was like, she was batshit crazy, but I really wanted to know, like, what was going on in that house, because I knew there was, like, 40 other women like me, and they had the same stories as me, the same consequences as me. And I'll never forget that when the judge sentenced me there, he said, I don't think you're going to succeed here, but I'm going to give you a chance anyway. And I was like, okay, yeah, okay, all right, cool, like, this might be not a good idea, but okay. I wouldn't give me that chance at that point, but he did, he saw fit to give me that chance. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to stay for a couple of days and see how this goes, And
but your intention was still you really still believed you were going to run because you're a runner, right?
Right. I was a runner, and I was like, you know what? I can be out of the state. Like I have, like I've got a plan. But
I've got track shoes.
Yeah, right, right. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so, but I saw what was going on in that house, and the feeling that was going on in that house. I was curious, and so I stayed a little bit longer, and I stayed to find out what these people knew that I didn't, and what this milieu coordinator, right, the person that was running the facility, like I was like, whatever I want what she's got, and eventually I decided that I was going to stay. And so I decided that I was going to stay for my kids, right? Like, these people were getting their kids back. I came in, like, on a Wednesday, and on Sunday they had Kids Day. And I was like, if there's any chance of me getting those babies back, I want to be here. And watching them on, Kids Day and stuff like that, like, I stayed, and I stayed, and I stayed, and that didn't happen for me. They reached out to my, they had a liaison to help with getting the children back, and they're like, oh no, we've already told the kids this, and she's gone out of their life, and they don't want to see her, and yada yada. And so it came to a point where I had to make a decision, and I had enough clean time behind me to where I finally decided, are you going to live or are you going to die? Regardless of the outliers, regardless of your children, your husband that's not really your husband at this point because you're like, what the hell, your mother, your father, whatever, are you going to live or are you going to die? And I had done enough things in that program to realize that I wanted to live, right? The most important thing that they did for me was introduce me to a 12-step fellowship, right? And so that 12-step fellowship told me that I had a disease of addiction, right? That I did not have a moral dilemma, that I had a disease for which there was no known cure, but recovery was possible, that this disease could be arrested at some point and recovery was then possible. And so my introduction to that fellowship combined with the behavioral modification that I was receiving, right? Like, for somebody to be like, you're okay. Like, we realize that you did not ask for this, that you did not want to intentionally be a horrible mother, be a horrible daughter, be a horrible employee, be a horrible sister. These things are not your fault, but this is your responsibility. And there's one thing I know how to do, and that is be responsible, right? Especially when somebody has faith in me. And that was the thing, my dad always had faith in me, but it was the kind of faith that you just know your dad has to have in you, right? Because I grew up with that. And that's why, like, my idea of a higher power in the fellowship, right? It can be anything. It's very easy for me to believe in a higher power that believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery, and this unconditional love, because my dad's always shown that to me. And it's tangible for me, right? And I could grab that. And so it was pretty easy for me to, get involved, and I was finally a part of something where I felt like I belonged, right? Because I never felt like I belonged in my family. I was letting everybody down. I didn't belong in my household as a mother anymore. I was letting everybody down. I was a horrible sister. I was letting my brothers down. I mean, I was the one that was always going to outdo everybody, and there was great expectation for my life from both myself and my family, and I didn't start using drugs till I was 23 years old. And so this was like a big shock to everyone's system. And so, oh my gosh, when you guys told me that, I could do anything, and then I started combining that, like I said, with the behavioral modification, and, like, we get in there, and the only thing you could say is okay for 30 days. Like, I always have something to say. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I always have a justification, a rationalization, something, right, that I can throw back at you. And, when I started working the steps and going to meetings, and especially being of service. So service really saved my life, right? My have to became, because you had to go to meetings at first, right? And then your have to becomes a get to, becomes a want to. And I was getting into that, and so I excelled, right? And finally graduated the program. I'll never forget, like, I was off paper before I graduated. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, but I was, like, I didn't really break the rules in-house, but when I got to, like, outpatient and transitional, I started dabbling with the guys, and so I started dating some of
Your
the
other addiction?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And
For
so,
sure.
and so, I got sent back in house, and I wanted to complete that program and be a part of that so bad that I literally paid like extra treatment fees to graduate this program, right? And now I have peer brothers and sisters that are part of my life forever, right? And so I've known a lot of these people for a long time, right? And so we're family. And so I eventually ended up getting my own place, and I'll never forget, like, my first apartment. It was like bed bug infested, and but I was so proud of that apartment. I was so happy to have that apartment.
So grateful, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I got a job. I've always been in construction, but I've been a welder and ship fitter for so many years, right? And so there's no water here, so there's no boats to build.
Yeah.
So I
heard
not our
shipbuilder, and I was
service
like, where is she
industry,
building
right.
ships?
like I was running from the law.
you.
I mean, it was good. I wasn't working at the time. And so we, I got into, I'll never forget, like going to these job interviews, and then I found this one place that I really wanted to work. And they were a general contractor, and, I started working with them and building gas stations, and they believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And I was like, hey, here's the deal. Like, I could work for you, but I have to call like every 4 hours and, all this stuff. And they were willing. And I ended up being one of the best employees they had. And I worked my way up, from on my tools to superintendent to project manager. And then, I bought my first house, and, I did my side company, BFAB. And so that was Brandi's Fabrication, or Brandi's Fabulous, whatever you want to say. And so I was, doing like handrails and stairs, and, it was growing a little bit. And eventually I saw a need for some more subcontractors, so I was able to do some of that. And I was doing both things, but I was very loyal to this company because this company believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, like I said. And so,
And it was your first job coming out of
it absolutely was.
Starting in your recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was comfortable there, and I was valued, and to be valued after being unvaluable for so long, right? These people became my family, and they celebrated my clean time with me, and they knew my past, but all they saw was what was in front of them, right? And so I eventually started making my amends, and a lot of the amends that I made was to myself, right? And so I had to do chemotherapy for my liver. And so, that was back when interferon was like, you lost all your hair and you had to give yourself like 20 shots a day and take, it was pretty crazy. And so it was 11 months of that. And I was like, well, I'm Brandi J. Like, they don't know. Like, I'm still going to work, like, because I'm going to do this. Like, I do all the things and stuff. I've got this. And about a week into it, I was like, I cannot, like, go to a job site every day. I was waving my white flag. And so by that point, let me back up a little bit. By that point, I had gone back to the state of Washington at 4 years clean to make my amends. And I planned on going to prison, right? Because I didn't want to not be able to visit my parents. I didn't want to be looking over my shoulders, and I knew I owed this amends. So I went to make an amends to the state of Washington, and I called ahead, and I got an attorney. He's like, oh, not only do you have that, you actually have like 3 other counties that have outstanding charges on you. And so I said, well, book them all in the same week. I'm coming out. Put the one that I'm going to prison on last. Let's run it concurrent. Like, let's make a plan.
And by making your amends, you mean your criminal amends. So you were going back to the state of Washington to turn yourself in.
To turn myself in and do my time.
That is really commendable.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was in that apartment. So it was before I bought my house, and the guy I was living with at the time, I signed the lease over to him, and I was like, this is what's going to happen, and this is where we're at, and I'm going to go do my 14 years, and I'll probably only do half time because it's not nonviolent. And so I kind of knew how the system worked there by then. And I said my goodbyes, and there was a convention going on at the time. My home group members, about 10 of them were going out there because one of them was the speaker for that convention. And so I tried to plan it around where I could go to the convention, get filled up with some recovery, and then go to prison. And so that was the plan. And then when the dates came about for court, they wouldn't change my date, so it was actually the week before the convention. So I gave my convention away to a newcomer, and I was like, that's okay. This is where we're supposed to be. So I started showing up to court, and I went through the first court date, and it was on the island, and it was for driving under the influence. I have a lot of DUIs, but not for alcohol. They're all for drugs. Mm-hmm. And so this first one, and they lost the blood evidence, and I was like, what's going on? This kind of stuff doesn't happen for me. They usually find like everything. And then, whatever. And so that worked. So this was on a Monday. So Tuesday, I went to another court date, and they gave me 2 weeks of ankle monitor for a paraphernalia charge that I could serve in Colorado. And I was like, nobody's ever given me an ankle monitor before. Like, this is cool. Like, I was never trusted with an ankle monitor.
And telling me I can go back home.
And telling me I can go back home, right? And I'm like, but it was overshadowed by this one that I had at the end, you know? And so I'm like, that's great, checks out. Like, this is so cool. I can't believe these blessings are happening to me, And so the next court date, it was another DUI, and they wanted to give me 3 years but now I had one under my belt, right? And they ended up having to throw out the case because there was a dirty cop on the case, and whoever was involved in his cases had to be thrown out. Like, this stuff only happens on TV, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, what are you doing here, higher power? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on, right? And so I'm struggling with, like, oh my gosh, miracles are happening. And then, yeah, these are happening because this is going to happen, right? Because we have the committee in our head talking back and forth. Yeah. So Thursday I go in front of this judge, and it was the same judge who had sent me to prison twice before. And I'm like, holy hell, this is going down. Well, the DA came up to me before it, and the thing I want to stress is that before I went, this same person who was the milieu coordinator had become one of my best friends. And she suggested that I make a Faces of Recovery booklet to where I had, like, from my mugshot to where I was today, with photographs and letters from my employer and letters from my landlord and letters from paying off student loans and letters from, everything. I had a letter from the Secretary of State.
Show your current character.
Absolutely. And so I presented this binder, right? And I'll never forget, like, I was waiting to see him. The guy before me pissed him off, and I'm like, I'm going down. And the DA came up to me, and they're like, listen, we're gonna give you a deal for 5 years because of what you're doing. Like, and I think they felt the temperature in the room before I did, And I was like, this is the blessing, I'm only gonna do like 2.5, 3 years. Like, I'm gonna be good. And I was celebrating. I went in the bathroom, and I just dropped on my knees, and I cried. And I was like, this is what's happening. And so I literally went in there with a simple prayer that my sponsor had taught me, and it was GGMM, God guide my mouth, And so I use that all the time. It's very versatile prayer that you could say.
Really versatile. I love
it's
that.
Very versatile. So I went in there, and my dad is by my side, my significant other is by my side, and the judge says, aren't you the girl that nodded off my courtroom last time? And I'm like, and the DA's like, that's her, And he said, and you realize that you absconded from the state of Washington? I'm like, yes, Your Honor, I did. And he's like flipping this book, like angrily, like he's flipping this binder as he's speaking to me. He's like, and you realize I don't have to go along with the DA's recommendation, correct? And I'm like, yes, Your Honor, I do. And I'm like, I'm going down. And so, and he says, he stops and he says, I have never seen anybody in my courtroom who has made significant changes you have. And he says, and I'm not going along with the DA's recommendation. I'm giving you 0 days and a mouth swab because you did commit a bunch of felonies. He's like, he said, the only thing I ask is that when you come back to visit your parents, you'll come speak at my drug court.
Mm-hmm. Drug court.
And I was like, wow. And by now I knew what drug court was, right? I would have never succeeded, but back then, but I made the right decision.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was like, so I wouldn't leave the courtroom, right? So I'm like, my dad's like trying to drag me out. I'm like, but yes, Your Honor, but you do realize, he's like, you're free to go. And I'm like, okay, but Your Honor, but you do realize I live in Colorado. And he's like, you're free to go. And I'm like, okay, but there's a convention I want to go to in Ocean Shores, Washington. And he's like, go to your convention. Like, and my dad's like, pulling me. But I just couldn't, I couldn't believe this was happening to me. And so they're still like on the CD from that year at the Pac North, or at the 12-step convention, that you can hear the speaker saying, and this girl is not supposed to be here. Like, what, these are the gifts of recovery, right? And so I went back to Colorado, and I wore my little ankle monitor for 2 weeks, and I get a message on Facebook from some random person, right? Because I always kept my Facebook updated, and I still do that today. It's very important for me because I wanted my kids to know what I was doing every single day, so that if they were watching, just by chance, that they would know that I loved them and they were the most important thing in my life. And I get a random message, and I knew immediately it was my daughter. And so she was so brave, and she said, I said, Cassie, I know this is you. And she said, can you please not tell my dad that I called you? And I said, I don't operate in dishonesty today, and I won't, but I will come fight for you. I said, I'll come fight for visitation. And so I called an attorney because I was feeling pretty good about courtrooms at that time. And so I called an attorney, and I said, I just want some supervised visitation with my daughter. And, these things that we want for ourselves, like when we get into recovery and we're doing the next right thing for the next right reason, like we have no idea what's in store for us, and we always shortchange ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I went back, and I'll never forget, planning this trip, like on the fly, like I was going down to, I was going to get 6 days of supervisor visitation with my daughter, and my sponsor called me, and she's like, that's crazy. Like, myself and another, one of your friends is going down there to see another addict at the same time. We've had this trip planned for a year, right? And these are those coincidences that we don't overlook when we know what we know, right? And so I was not alone on that trip, first of all. Like, I was surrounded by my people, and I was introduced to a fellowship down there where I never knew what the word addict was, right? And so I was able to be guided and surrounded by people that love me, and watched me walk through this. I get to the airport, and my ex-husband texts me, says, we need to talk. And I'm like, okay, meet me somewhere public. And so we sat down, he talked, and he said, I haven't been completely honest. Like, I've been going out on the oil rigs, working, leaving the kids at home for like 30 days at a time, you need to take Cassie. Michael's not ready yet, but you need to take Cassie. And these are my two younger ones. My older ones were already grown and out of the house. I'm still not speaking to me. Cassie was the first one. And he said, if you want to take her back with you, I don't have a problem with that. And so I went to get her. And when I got there and walked into that house, I started packing up her stuff, right? And I'm like, we're gonna get you new stuff. Like, it was kind of squalor. It was squalor. And I couldn't believe that all this time, like, I thought that I couldn't provide for these kids. And the image that I had of myself was so bad still that I was, I just really felt like they didn't want to talk to me, and like I shouldn't try to impose on their life at this point. And they were happy, and they had, a parent, and all this kind of stuff. And but hindsight's 20/20, and everything happened just the way it was supposed to happen. I walked in that room, I'm like digging some of her favorite stuffed animals out, and I come across this homemade ceramic medallion with our logo on it for the 12-step fellowship that I'm in. And it was ceramic, and it was painted. And I was like, Cassie, where did you get this? And she says, I don't know, Mama. It's been here since I got here. Since we moved in, it was in the closet.
How crazy.
And I was like, man, I am in the care of. I am in the care of. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And so it just really progressed from there. And I ended up getting all 4 of my children back, and I came back with custody of her on my birthday. I ended up getting them all back. I started, after the chemotherapy, I had no choice but to expand BFAB, and it became a multi-million-dollar company. I eventually went back to the place I was working, and I was like, hey, because I was loyal to them, and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to come back to work. And, one of the owners pulled me aside and said, you're doing too good on your own, girl. Keep flourishing. And so that's what we did, and it just grew and grew. And then, I worked a lot of steps and stuff, and I had one reservation that kept showing up on my step work, and it was like, if anything ever happens to my dad, I don't know if I can stay clean. And I was self-deceiving myself, right? I was like, well, I know what to say to this because I'm in the middle of the boat. I work steps. I go to meetings. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor. I'm of service. I have sponsees, and I know what I would tell somebody else to do, to talk to somebody who's been through that before, and that was always my rebuttal for my own bullshit in my head. And then my dad was visiting me, and he, I had a stroke, and my left side was paralyzed. It all came back except for my hand, and I couldn't drive. And so he was driving me around. My dad always shows up. He was there within 12 hours, and he was working from my house. He works for the government, so he's home. He was working from my house, and he said, eventually, when we got these things figured out, I was having seizures, needed medication. He's about to go home, and he said, do you mind if we take the Harleys, because I love to ride. My dad taught me how to ride when I was a little girl, and I loved to ride my Harleys. And he said, do you mind if we take the Harleys and go down to the motorcycle expo? And I'm like, please get out of my hair. You've been doting on me. Like, this is annoying at this point. And, about an hour later, I got a call, and it said, Dad's down. And from that moment on, my life changed, right? And so I flew down to the site, and they were resuscitating my father for the 3rd time. I was already, having medical issues. My son had gone into the Marine Corps. Like, my daughter was about to graduate, so, like, all this stuff was happening. And there were a lot of changes going on in my life. So from that moment on, I made it my mission to make sure that my father was okay. And, I will never regret that decision. It was an honor to be able to take care of the man that took care of me for so long. And I took care of him to the best of my ability. We were in the hospital for 14 months between St. Luke's and all the surgeries, and then aftercare for the brain injury and the physical therapy. And I never left the hospital. I didn't go to meetings. I didn't call my sponsor. I didn't work steps. I just continued to take care of my father, and I took that proverbial oxygen mask off of myself and put it on him, and I suffocated. And so after he was back to Washington State, we're walking and talking, I didn't know who I was when that ended. My kids were gone from the house. Like, my significant other had relapsed, and I didn't know where I was in the fellowship. I had resentments. I'm like, why didn't these people come save me? Well, the fact is I should have reached out for help because I could have had 150 addicts at that hospital, but I had too much pride, right, and ego. I didn't want them to see me in that shape that I was in. And so I relapsed, and I fell hard again, and I fell quickly, and I ended up with 3 more distribution and manufacturing charges within a very short period. And people that used with me at that time will tell me, the only thing that you talked about when you were using was like, you guys don't have to live this way anymore. There's a fellowship that can help you. As I was using, it was like I knew where I needed to go, but I didn't know how to get back there. The guilt and the shame was horrible. I had 10 years when I went out. I was a very significant staple in our fellowship and in just giving back to the community in general. And my life became unmanageable again. And then I decided I'd had enough. After that 3rd one, I was looking at prison time again, and I decided I had enough. Long story short, I went to DOC. I ended up going to DOC, and I didn't think they were going to send me to DOC. I'm like, with all this stuff I've done for the community, I'm like, we always think we're unique and that we're entitled and all that stuff. And the judge,
you're going to get another light shining down on you.
Right. I'm like, this is how this is supposed to go. And
this time it was time to pay.
It was time to pay, and so I became a part of Colorado DOC, and I didn't react very well at first. I got in there and I was still angry, and I was angry at myself more than anything, but, I didn't know how to project that. And I ended up, oh my gosh, I ended up getting in fights when I first got there, and, got some extra time and all of this stuff. And then finally, like, I had this clarity, kind of the same clarity that I experienced before. And I was like, I know what I need to do. And I ended up going through TC there, and I was finally able to go to meetings behind the walls, which is where I'd taken the meetings before, right? So I know what bringing a meeting behind a wall looks like. I know how important it is. And so I'll never forget another addict showing up, and he was speaking, and he didn't even recognize me. And I went up to him after, because he talked about, somebody in the fellowship had died after a long period of clean time, and I wanted to know who it was. And, I said, who was it? And he's like, this is who it was. Do you know her? And I looked up at him, and he's like, holy shit, this is do you know who you have in here? This is what's going. Why are you running this place? Why aren't you sharing your experience, strength, and hope? Why aren't you and he said, get your act together. You need to do something with yourself and get your act together. And from that moment forward, I started carrying the message behind the walls, right? And, I eventually got out of prison and went straight to another addict's house, and I was, welcomed with open arms into the fellowship. And those resentments that I had, while some of them were valid, they all melted away. The gratitude took over, right? And the one thing I can tell you is that I do my recovery today just like I did it before. I take the stuff that doesn't work and I threw it away, right? And I take the stuff that does work, and I carry a stronger message today. And the one thing that I really have learned is that before I was doing it for others, today I'm doing it for myself. I don't care what I look like when I go into a meeting. I don't care what you think of me, or if I say the right thing during my share, or, how I handle, I'm just me. And, if you can't take me at this is the authentic me. And so, I don't want to put on a facade, because that facade got me clean. I've let down walls because the people that do know me know my authentic self. So I've been able to get closer, to the women in the fellowship, right? So I always had issues with distrust of women, and disrespect for women, I think, is more like it, right? Because I didn't respect my mothers. And, I, only had so much respect for my father. And so I looked to men. I have only brothers, and so I work with men, and so that's the people I surrounded myself, right? But this relationship that I have with the women in my life, like Nani today, we are like this squad that can't be broken up, all of us, and we share our highs, we share our lows, we share our experience, strength, and hope, and we walk through this with as much grace as we can, but in an authentic way. And I can tell you that, we say an authentic share is heard, right? And so I pay more attention to what a newcomer is saying, or, I never want to get to that place again where I feel like I have to say a certain thing to be okay in recovery. I am just me. I walked through this. I was I've only been out of prison for less than 5 months, and I have my own place. I just bought this brand new truck, and it's not about material things, but it's about getting back, the things that I lost, and so I've got a great position with a big developer in town as vice president of construction, and I'm a good employee. I've always cared about, the outcome of what I do. I take pride in what I do. I take pride in my recovery. I take pride in my job. I do want to point out that there's things that I don't have in my life today. My kids are all pissed at me. They're not talking to me. And that came from, some of the craziness that happened when, I used again, right? And they were very disappointed. They had never seen me fail from the time I got them back. Everything was just, butterflies and unicorns and, all that stuff. And so there were some things that went on, and they were very disappointed in me. And so, but I know how this goes, right? Mm-hmm. I know that if I keep doing the next right thing for the next right reason, that everything that is supposed to come to me will. And I can tell you right now that I don't worry about my kids. I raised some amazing kids, right? They don't have addiction problems, probably because they called me Dora the Explorer when they were growing up, right? And so I was like always searching their room and stuff, when they were acting up. Like I was like, I was like a little overbearing. But, they were raised with responsibility. They were raised with values. They know what's right. They know what's wrong, and they act accordingly. They're independent. They have their own places. They have their own jobs. They have their own, like they work for Chevron. They're in the Marine Corps. They're running their own companies. They're in law school, And so I don't worry about them, selfishly, I want my relationship with them. But if this is the best I get today, I'm going to be okay with that because today I'm going to live. Right? And then I do have my grandkids in my life. I have 5 of my grandkids in my life. And I get to go see them play football all the time and like take them out for ice cream and spend time with them. So if that's the best I get, cool. But I very highly doubt it is because I know how this works, right? Yeah. And so, I'm in a place today where I still do meetings behind walls, it's very important for me to carry that message. And now I just have more of a message. Before I didn't know what relapse looked like, and now I do. I know what coming back in after a long period of clean time looks like, right? And I know the guilt and the shame that comes along with that. I know how hard it is to take your seat back. And I also know that you better not let that seat ever be taken from you again. So I appreciate you letting me share.
I appreciate you coming in and doing it.
Man,
I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
High five. Like we started off and we're going to end it with another high five too. That's my girl, Brandi Jennings from Denver. Congratulations on your journey to your recovery and where you are today. Congratulations on where you are today.
Thank you.
And where you will be in the future.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to hearing, like you said, how things will happen, how they're supposed to happen. I look forward for an update from you in the future.
You got it.
Nani, anything?
When I hear you say, I'm going to live today, what I hear you say is I'm going to love myself and I'm going to choose my recovery the way that I want to do it today.
Right.
That's what I hear you say.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, sometimes we have to be selfish with our recovery. I've had to let go of things that didn't work and people that didn't work, right? Even in the fellowship, like even with the people I surround myself, like everybody's a half like me, and I don't have to be everybody's friend. I had this very naive view before, but I do have to respect your recovery, and I do have to be there to help you if you need it.
GGMM.
That's right.
GGMM.
Yep. My mouth.
And that is one thing that I like to keep quotes from people that come in and speak, and that's one that I will carry with me. God, guide my mouth. All right. Malhai, time has flown by, and I have so many things that I would love to ask you, but we're out of time. So, gosh, it came and it went. But our guest has been Brandi Jennings from Denver. Malhai, if you've missed any portion of this program and you want to hear it in its entirety, you can go to facebook.com/SOS sharing our stories. You can also find this on flowdenver.com, jammin1015.com. You can find it on all your podcast sites. Just search for SOS sharing our stories. And please share this program and subscribe to our program and join us again. This airs every Sunday morning, 7 a.m. on Jammin 1015 and Flow 107.1. And we're just here to tell you that, yes, we do recover and that you don't have to suffer in your addiction. So thank you for being a part of the program. To our guest, Brandi Jennings, thank you for being our guest. We got a big group hug coming right after this. And this is Sharing Our Stories. I want to say a special thanks to Caring for Denver and, of course, to Tribe Recovery Homes. We'll see you again right here.